3 decades ago, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers captured my imagination. Like many of my fellow 90s kids, I watched after school, joined the official fan club, and of course, collected the toys. Eventually, I put those toys away, but the flame of my Power Rangers fandom never died. Now, in this milestone 30th anniversary year, I am re-examining the show, its legacy, and the tale of its most legendary ranger across media. It's time to get back to action. Welcome to Summoning the ZORDS, a Power Rangers fan journey. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me to discuss the Mighty Morphin story arcs on the television show, The Mutiny and the Wedding, is the host of the COMIC JUNKIES podcast, JJ Hodges. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here because I don't really get to talk Power Rangers, even in my private life, that much. So this is exciting.
Yeah, I'm glad that we can compare notes. We'll talk about your Power Rangers fan journey, and of course, we'll talk about this pair of three-parters, The Mutiny and the Wedding, that in a lot of ways sort of bookend season 2 of Mighty Morphin. The Mutiny is the beginning of season 2. The Wedding is not the very end of season 2, but it's towards the end. And right. I think these two arcs pair together very nicely. Between these two stories, we get a lot of movement, a lot of development, a lot of new elements in the show. We have the introduction of LORD ZEDD, an original to the American show. The ousting of Rita Repulsa. We get new putties. We get new ZORDS. We get helmetless Rangers for the first time on the show, and we get a lot of it in that first arc. Later on, we'll have the return of Rita, the wedding of Rita and Zedd. There's a lot to unpack in this pair of two-parters, and we were just talking off mic, but you're here for this. You had reached out and over Twitter, and you were like, "Hey, like these," you singled out these this run of episodes in particular. So maybe that's a good place to start. What was it about these episodes, these storylines in particular, that really sparked your interest?
If no other Power Rangers stories stuck with me, these ones did. Like especially the Mutiny, which I'm sure we'll go into. That being, it was prime time premiere. That was a big deal. So it's like, instead of, I'm slightly exaggerating. So it's like, instead of watching Home Improvement tonight or Family Matters, we're going to watch Power Rangers. So that was kind of cool. And that stuff just didn't happen with kid shows. And getting into, and even the wedding, the idea of, as silly as it sounds, like all the monsters being there, a lot of them coming back, I just thought was the coolest thing, because, you being, us being Superman fans or comic book fans, I gobble that up when there's like team ups with not just the heroes, but the villains too. I just think that's so cool. And just, I don't know. I'm getting excited just thinking about it, because it's so much fun to revisit all that and go, man, like that was so much fun seeing like Eye Guy again, and the bee monster, and a couple of the other ones. Like the main two that are escaping my my brain right now. The bird thing, and then the armadillo one. I'm sure they have names, but it doesn't matter. They're monsters. Who cares? But all that was just so cool to see, and it's the stuff that, like, as a comic book fan, you gobble that up, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned the primetime airing of The Mutiny. So it aired on July 21st, July 29th, and August 5th, 1994. I wish I could get on here and be like, I remember exactly where I was when I was watching those episodes. I have such a vivid memory. I don't. I have at least a vague memory of watching it at night, and I must have, because I was all about this show. Right. And, I couldn't get enough. And so the idea of it airing in prime time, it's like, I'm sure I watched it. And like I said, I have at least the vaguest memory of it. I don't remember it as specific. Like, do you have a clearer memory of that moment of watching it at night?
Not really, as much as I just remember it being, because we had two TVs. We had one upstairs and one downstairs. And I remember, I think my dad being like, well, I'm watching something upstairs, so you can watch it downstairs. Like I was allowed to stay up late that night or something like that, But I don't fully remember. I just remember that aspect of it. And and I don't, and it wasn't even like it is nowadays, or even not that long after, where you know it's like, oh, all this information is given to us, so we know when to watch the new episode of whatever we're watching. It's a totally different world now with streaming, but I remember I think it was my sister that said, "Oh, did you know that Power Rangers is on TV tonight?" And that got me excited. Like, oh, it's on tonight. Like, that's so cool, as opposed to being a after school thing. It was like the biggest difference in the world to my 7-year old brain.
Right, right. So we were exactly the same age at the time. So that
Mm.
at least in part explains our shared love of the show generally and this era in particular. I mean, season 2 was huge. In addition to everything that we got out of these arcs alone, this season also gave us the return of Tommy as the White Ranger, and it also gave
Hmm.
us Rocky, Adam, and Aisha taking the place of Jason, Trini, and Zach. So a ton of movement in this season. I
Yeah.
look at that entire Mighty Morphin era, those 3 seasons, with a lot of love. But as I'm revisiting a lot of this with adult eyes and trying to put it in context and think about how I took it in the first time, yeah, I think this season was really a pivotal one. And beginning right off the bat with the mutiny, with this revelation that Rita's not at the top of the villain heap, right? There's someone
Yeah.
above her. So they're on the moon base, and all of a sudden, there's lightning and thunder. And Goldar, of course, is the first one to be like, it must be Lord Zedd. The true emperor has returned. And, Zedd makes this, appears as this like vision in space. And that's the first glimpse that we get of him. And then a little while later in that throne room, we have, I mean, one of the most badass, memorable entrances, I would say, in the entire
Yeah.
series, where the throne materializes, and you see the Z, and he turns around, and you see that red hide and the tubes and the snake all over him that turns into his staff. I mean, the
Yeah.
metal, the grate over his mouth. It's an imposing standout visual, and like I said, original to this show. This was not an instance of them repurposing a Japanese character or Japanese footage. This was the show creating their own villain.
Yeah.
In It's funny because I don't remember this being a thing at the time, but in hearing and reading about Power Rangers, now looking back, I guess it was an issue that kids were scared of Zed. Like, do you remember being scared? Do you remember friends of yours talking about being scared? Because I don't really have like a memory of this, but apparently it was a thing, I guess.
I don't remember being scared of him as much as I just thought, that he just looked awesome. Like, he looks evil, and that was my only thought process. I just thought, oh, like he sounds scary, he looks scary. He just, and even to this day, I kind of maintain that he's still one of the scarier looking of the Power Ranger villains. And and that entrance is, I am Lord Zedd, Emperor of all I see. It's just like, we're in trouble, and so no, I don't, but to the other point, I don't remember anybody I knew ever saying that they were scared of him or anything like that. Um, like, if anything, I don't know. I thought Goldar in the first season was scary.
I mean, honestly, it was probably parents who were like, "Oh, our kids are scared of this" or something like that. Because
Yeah.
I mean, like, same here. I don't remember being scared of Zed, and this was a point in time where I guess first grade, I guess I was in, or second at this point. But like there were still a lot of kids in my class who were watching Power Rangers. I don't ever remember that being a thing. I think we were just all excited, and
Yeah.
like to the show's credit, this mixed things up, right? We had dozens of episodes with Rita as the main antagonist. We had a well established formula here. And it's not just, eventually, yes, she and Zed will work together, but, for most of season 2, Rita's off the board. So,
Yeah.
this was kind of a big swing. And again, even more so that they weren't taking an established character from the Super Sentai series, that they were, coming up with something on their own. So I think it was a big swing, but man, it paid off. I would imagine anyone in our age group and just Power Rangers fans generally, if you ask them for favorite villains, from the entire franchise, I feel like Lord Zed would be up there. Very effective. I mean, I guess it's the combination of the visual and that Rob Axelrod voice. I mean, it just
Yeah.
really created an effect, right?
And the music too. Just it's funny because I'm sure we'll get into it. I realized this rewatching it, that how much the music plays a part in the show, um, which I realized as a kid but didn't really think about. But one thing I did realize, slightly off topic, was I was like, you know what? Bulk and Skull don't bother me. Their music bothers me. It makes them so much worse because I could find them more tolerable if that music wasn't there, versus Lord Zed, where I think the music enhances, his presence and everything, and it just sounds like I don't know, like a symphony, And didn't there used to be lyrics? I feel like there were lyrics where it was like Lord Zed. Like maybe I'm misremembering, but I swear to God, that was a part of it at one point.
Oh, I don't remember offhand, but to your point about the music generally, yeah, it goes a long way. And Tyler Patrick, who was on the show, or people will be hearing him on the show. We already recorded it. This is something that he kind of mentioned a while back when he and I were first starting to talk about Power Rangers, and I've been more dialed into this as I've been rewatching episodes. The music really, really sells a lot, and I've particularly enjoyed the Green Ranger and White Ranger specific pieces that accompany their fighting scenes, and
Same.
and it's one of those things like, and we've talked about how effective the fight scenes are generally, and how visceral, and seeing the actors actually mix it up, it's great. So there's a lot going on already, but the music really goes a long way towards really putting it over the top. And yeah, I agree that the music that accompanies Zed, thinking about what kind of stood out most from Zed's arrival. One thing from my perspective was how quickly Goldar turned on Rita. Did you find that
Yep.
was in keeping with his character, or were you surprised by that at all?
I will admit to I don't think I thought anything of it when I was a kid, but rewatching it now, I definitely uh, it it was jarring, and because I think, uh, for lack of a better term, maybe a better written show might have planted those seeds towards the end of the first season. Now
Oh, you're breaking up there,
it
unfortunately.
done.
So
Like,
you were
you know what I mean?
Yeah, so you were breaking up there for a bit. You actually cut off right after you said a better written show might have planted seeds for it along the first season. So I don't know if you don't mind giving us that
Uh,
next piece one more time.
yeah, yeah. What I said, but the end of the first season would have teased Goldar's heel turn, and then the the beginning of this season, when Lord Zed shows up, would have Goldar saying, "I called him because you're not getting it done. The Power Rangers are still alive." You know what I mean? Like, so that would be kind of an interesting dynamic there. But that's not that's not the way the show was written. That's not the way it was, and I feel bad saying better written because I only mean that in the sense that the show, was just it wasn't as serialized as stuff is nowadays. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, look, we all love the show. We have a lot of affection for it. I don't know that anyone would hold this up as the epitome of writing necessarily. I mean, for a kid show, I think it really works. But I mean, that's the thing, right? Ultimately, this was aimed at a very young audience, and too, in fairness, at a very different time. I mean, I believe you have a 3-year-old as well as do I, and so what we're watching now, we're not necessarily in that category yet, but as he gets older and we start to watch more kids programming akin to what maybe you and I grew up with, it probably is more sophisticated. I mean, I feel like storytelling generally and television, there's been an evolution, right, over 30 years. So keeping in
Yeah.
mind the time period and the audience, I think the writing's just fine. But yeah, I think it's reasonable to say like, oh, they could have done that. And that's one of the things going back and looking at all of these things. It doesn't ruin the show or take away from the enjoyment. But yeah, there are plenty of instances where I'm like, oh man, I wish they could have gotten into this
Yeah.
aspect. Like, for example, I know we've been talking a lot, especially in the early episodes of this podcast, about Tommy's arc as the Green Ranger. And I think what made all of those episodes, from Green with Evil, but even more so, the Green Candle and Green No More and Missing Green, like all of those episodes, so compelling, was that there were some personal stakes, and the Rangers, Tommy in particular, but the whole team, like, they were actually struggling with something. And one
Yeah.
of the things that I really liked in the Mutiny 3-parter was this was the point in time. Tommy hasn't fully lost his powers yet, but they're on the decline, and so he can't really pull his own weight really in battle the way he used to. And, he doesn't have enough power to power a new Zord when the Rangers get all their new Zords. And, you see that weighing on him. You see that feeling of uselessness, right? When he's in the command center and the rest of them go and he has to stay behind. And again, you don't get a ton of that, at least in this arc, but when you get something like that, I always love it. You always wish that there's more, but I'm grateful for what we did get.
No, I totally agree. And even talking off mic about the comic books and how they have the time and the quote unquote budget to expand on all that, whereas the TV show just wasn't really interested in that. It was essentially 25-minute or 30-minute toy commercials. But luckily they were effective, and 30 years later we can still enjoy them. And I watched them alone. I didn't watch them with my daughter. I don't think she'd have any interest. But then again, who knows? Kids are weird. But I just sat there going, man, like this is just fun, and do I wish there was more of that? And maybe some of it is just the actors doing what they can with what they're given, which isn't that much, but it's exciting to watch it and feel like, man, like everybody was committed to putting out something of quality at least. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that really comes through. For sure. You were breaking up there a little bit, but at that time we got I think we got the heart of what you were saying.
yeah.
So, and I'll say too, I showed my son a little bit of Power Rangers when I started rewatching it for this podcast. He was very interested. My wife thought it might maybe a little bit too much violence for him at 3, so we'll hold off on it. But he loves dinosaurs, so I showed him even just the opening credits, and he saw the Zords. He was very excited. So, as he gets a little older, I feel like I watched these as a kid. Obviously, I'm watching a lot of them again now for this podcast. I probably have one more viewing in me. If and when he wants to. And
Right.
And I don't say this in a negative way, but it's at the same time, is this something I'm going to be rewatching over and over for the rest of my life? I don't know. I don't really foresee that. It's been an absolute joy though, going back to it now for this. And like I said, I would happily rewatch it if he wants to. But yeah, I don't know how. Maybe there's certain episodes or scenes I would always go back to, but certainly not like full on rewatches. And even now, that's sort of the one. I don't know. Cheat's not the right word, but the one thing with doing this podcast, I'm not rewatching every episode, and I think that helps. Because for example, with season 2, I have watched a little bit more than what I've been assigning guests for episodes, just for myself, just out of curiosity. And what we're talking about on the podcast generally are the event episodes and arcs, right? Where the most stuff happens and the stakes are the highest, and there are big changes in the series, and those are the most exciting. The run-of-the-mill, standard episode, it follows its formula. You know what you're going to get. And, your mileage will vary on each one. Maybe you like the design of the villain, or maybe the whatever personal drama one of the Rangers has that the episode revolves around, might speak to you or whatever. But, they're not necessarily the most gripping. At least I'm finding that now. But, again, the episodes that we're talking about, there's definitely more meat on the bone, more to sink our teeth into here.
Right.
So, we talked about Goldar. So Goldar quickly shows where his loyalties lie, and they're with Zedd. They are not with Rita. He seems more than happy to be done with Rita. I agree. It would have been cool. I mean, look, you see all of the abuse he takes from Rita over the entire first season. So it's not shocking that he would be happy to see her cast aside. But yes, I agree with you. I mean, it would have been cool if this had been seeded through a little bit more, but it is what it is. I think Goldar also, not to split hairs here, but I feel like Goldar gives us or justifies the title of this arc, because Mutiny, again, not to get so specific here, but typically what's ultimately happening here is Zedd, the Overlord, is coming and ousting Rita. But typically when I think of a mutiny, at least it's from within, from underneath sort of thing, like the underlings
Right.
revolting.
Mhm.
And so again, I think Goldar really, really satisfies that piece of it. So Zed, and we have this whole sequence where Rita is groveling, she's kissing his feet,
Yeah, yeah.
and nothing saves her. And Zed shrinks her and puts her in a dumpster, and the putties lift her up, and Zed casts her into space. Through this arc and the wedding, I finally, and this, look, for people who know all the ins and outs and all the behind the scenes, I know I'm going to sound very late to the game here. Pardon me, but I finally got exactly what was going on with the actresses portraying Rita,
Hmm.
right? So, like, I understood in the first season, even as a kid, but even more so now, right? Understanding the use of the footage and all that. So I understand in the first season when we see Rita on her moon base with her minions, Japanese footage dubbed over by American actress Barbara Goodson. Obviously, that's why the lips and the and the words do not match, right? She's dubbing over the
Yeah.
Japanese footage. Totally on board with that. What I definitely never realized as a kid was exactly what was happening in season 2 when we were now getting, I guess, primarily American footage of the moon scenes with the
Yeah.
villains, right? So we now have American actress Carla Perez playing Rita, but still dubbed over by Barbara Goodson. So now the lip movement and the words match up more, but you can still tell you're not hearing the voice of the person who you're seeing speak. But I guess they wanted the consistency, and obviously it was such an iconic voice, so it all becomes a lot clearer. And in the mutiny thing, like I believe that is Carla Perez who's starting at that point, but you only see like from the back of her head or the side. Like there were no like real close up shots of her face. They save that until she comes back in the wedding arc, and Finster makes that the cream for her face that de-ages her, right, and she takes it off, and now this is our new actress who's we're going to see in all of the American footage. As a kid, or even more recently, like how closely were you tracking any of this?
Um, it, it didn't really occur to me until rewatching it that it was the American actress in the Lord Zedd scenes, because I knew Lord Zedd was an American invention, and I thought that they filmed it cleverly, where you just kind of you see her from behind or kind of in the shadows, or the angle's a little off, whatever it is, or even when she shrinks, then it's just like a little doll they're throwing into the dumpster. Um, but so I was like, okay, like I knowing behind the scenes stuff and knowing how their specific situation worked, I dug it because it didn't feel. I wasn't rolling my eyes going, oh, well, here's where they're doing this. I was like, oh, okay, I see, the quote unquote compromises they made in the editing room, and that's cool.
Yeah, that's the thing. I feel like it's very easy, especially as an adult, to look at a lot of this stuff and be like, oh, what a cheat. And
Hmm.
look how they're faking it and all of that. But yeah, I find I come away from this more impressed with what they were able to do and how they were able to cobble this together,
Yeah.
especially when, and wait till we get to the wedding arc. That was crazy. So, but like that's the thing. It's I think it's from an editing standpoint in particular, it's impressive. And look, again, it's easy for us now, and we're pausing, and we're rewinding. You could do so much more, but for kids watching this live in the '90s, again, I had no clue. When I
Hmm.
was first watching this, so it works well enough. So she's back in the dumpster. She's off in space. I skipped over. I mentioned Zed's putties, but we also have that moment where Zed creates new putties.
Hmm.
What is your preferred brand of putty?
When I was a kid, I thought the new putties were it was really scary, and then as I got older, I was like, no, the original ones were way better, and also like the Zed's putties they might be stronger, but they're easier to beat. Like, and that's just that aspect of it I kind of couldn't let go. I didn't think much of it as a kid, but rewatching as an adult, I went, that's really, really stupid.
I'm with you. I had the same thought watching it because they make, Zed makes such a big deal about, he's not going to use their putties, right? He has his own putties.
Yeah.
And then
Right.
just as later, he's not going to use Finster's monsters anymore. He's going to make his own monsters. Like everything he does is
Yeah.
better, more powerful. And even Zordon and the Rangers, they, this whole powwow in the command center, we're talking about how like these Zeds are so, these putties are so much more powerful, and they really give the Rangers a run for their money in battle.
Yeah.
So yes, to your point, I think they are stronger, but easier to beat because as we and the Rangers discover, all you got to do is hit them hard enough in that Z on their chest. So they have this huge target for their opponents, and if you hit them hard enough there, they will explode, disintegrate, whatever you want to call it, which was not something that the original putties did, right? Like they sort of fought until they were down, and then I'm even having a hard time remembering now. Did they teleport away, or what was it?
They would teleport away because maybe somebody said, in the writer's room or the editing room or whatever, and just said, well, the putties got to go away somehow. You know what I mean? It just made it like, it's like, yeah, okay, but that's just, I don't know. I can't think of really a good example. Well, the example I had, have you ever watched It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia?
All, 15 seasons? Yes, I have.
The episode where the best comparison I can make is the episode where the McBoyles try and take over the bar, and then at the end of the episode when they're about the one McBoyle is about to fall, and they're like, no, 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 and he just like lands on his feet. He's like, oh, I'm okay. It's like that. It's like, oh my god, these putties are so strong. What are we gonna do? Oh, just hit him in the Z. They're gone. I'm like, oh, okay, that was easy. It's just and again, it almost would have been like better if Zed had faked them out and like, oh well, those. It's like, yeah, I wanted them to think that, but then the putties reform or something. I don't know, something like that. But again, it wasn't that type of show.
Yeah, exactly. And I will say, and I've talked about this on the show before, in my mind, when I think back on the putties, my mind always goes to these putties. So, whether or not the Z that could disintegrate them was silly, they definitely made the stronger impression on me, at least. Like I always, in my mind, if you say putty, this was the version that I would think of. Do you remember when you were a kid, do you remember thinking to yourself like, oh man, Rita's gone, and like having some kind of reaction to that?
I did think she was gone, and thinking like now what, because it just, and I was, yeah, it really just the idea of like, oh, I never thought we'd see her again, and thinking, well, Zed's the bad guy now. Like now what's going to happen? So I was, but I wasn't sad to see her go. I always found Rita to be super irritating. Like I said, like I loved Goldar and Scorpina, who vanished halfway through season one. But I always thought they were such cool looking villains, and a lot of the monsters were awesome looking. But Rita always just, I've got such a headache, just just so cringy to me.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, I would go with Zed, but I think and I'll be able to answer this better after I rewatch more of season 3 in particular. But I think that the newer iteration of Rita that we get in the wedding, I think that one won me over a little bit more. Maybe because they, I don't know, they weren't bound by the Japanese footage that they had to dub over. Like they could do a little bit more, and maybe again, like I'll be able to answer this better a little bit later because I don't remember exactly what my reaction was, but the more of the comedy that they played up between Rita and Zed as the married couple. I don't know. I think because overall my impression of Rita is generally positive, but I don't disagree. Like, especially when I watch a lot of the season 1 episodes, it's like she is grating, and it gets very repetitive in terms of, this, what she's barking at her minions and all of that. So I don't know. We'll see as we watch later episodes. But yeah, for now, certainly at this point in time, I'm not heartbroken that she's off the board for a bit. I think it mixes things up. I really liked that at the end of this arc, Tommy is like, hey, whatever happened to Rita? And, like fitting that it was Tommy, right? The one who she plucked and put under the spell and turned him into the Green Ranger, that he was the one to ask. And Of course, Alpha and Zordon are able to pull up her, flying dumpster on the viewing globe, and she's just sitting in there singing 99 bottles of slime on the wall, which all of them, including Zordon, find hilarious.
Yeah.
I had totally forgotten that Zordon sings at the end of that. Crazy.
That is so funny because I'm just the opposite. I'll never forget it. Like that image of Zordon, going 99 bottles of slime is burned into my brain. When I am old in a nursing home and have Alzheimer's, I will remember that. you know?
Yo, it definitely stood out. Now, I know maybe you know the answer. Certainly, I'm sure there are people listening to this who know the answer about what the original intention was when Rita was sent away. She's off the board in season 2 for so long that my gut is that maybe they were intending to just focus on Zed, but then maybe when there was this outcry over kids being scared, they had this idea to bring in Rita and marry them off and soften Zed and play him up for comedy a little bit more. I mean, I don't know. Do you have any insight or any gut sense about this?
No, I don't have any insight, but I would say that you're probably right because I think the first time she comes back is the White Light episodes.
Yes.
Like there's like the subplot with her and Bulk and Skull, which I rewatched those episodes not too long ago and actually really enjoyed them. But and I thought that aspect of Rita almost coming back was cool, and so I think it must have been that. It must have been something where it's like, well, we'll just we'll get rid of our new bad guy. It's all good, and because it's the Batman Forever syndrome, right? It's like, oh, the last one was too dark. We got to make the next one less dark, and it's like, okay, but like the people complaining about it, I would put good money on either haven't seen the movie or watched it once and didn't understand it, sort of situation. You know what I mean?
Yeah, fair enough. But yeah, and audience, if you have some insight, please feel free to reach out. I mean, that's again, watching it and then, knowing sort of the little bit that we do, I feel like that's probably the likeliest scenario, in terms of the plan with Rita. But, in any event, I mean, she's done away with rather quickly in this arc, and it's really about Zed, setting his plans into motion. Again, he's got the new putties. We have a new mechanism now for creating monsters. It's not Finster molding them from clay and then, bringing them to life. Now we have Zed taking animals and objects, right, and using his magic to turn them into monsters. And even when he makes them grow, it's not, throwing the wand down like it was with Rita. Now we have these bombs that he launches.
Yeah.
So obviously same idea. We're still following the same pattern and formula, but with a little bit of variation on it. The Rangers, meanwhile, during all of this, they're doing this charity motorbike race for the local hospital. And so, you get a lot of the Rangers on their bikes and everything, and they notice what weird stuff going on in the sky, right? And, Zordon brings them to the command center. Of course, Zordon knows. Rewatching this is the thing that I keep coming back to, and I don't mean to harp on it, but it's so weird to me how the villains and our heroes can always see what the other one is doing all the time.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, because
Yeah.
look, as a fellow, we're fellow comic book fans, like you think about all of these superhero movies and all the comics we've read, like I'm sure there are other things out there like this, but nothing that immediately comes to mind, and nothing to this extent. It's like they can just see each other all the time. It's so weird to me that they gave both sides that advantage.
It is, and I remember making a joke to friends of mine maybe like 10 or more years ago, talking about Power Rangers and saying, I don't know, man, I just think Zordon was stupid. Like he should have, he knew where Rita was. Why didn't he, instead of recruiting teenagers, recruit some like Green Berets to just go up there and assassinate her? Like he knew exactly where she was and what she was doing at all times, which is already like creepy in a way. And so why not send like the best of the best to go over there and just kill her and evil is done,
Yeah, I don't know. It's sort of weird to me, but I always have that in the back of my head as I'm watching. Speaking of creepy, this was not on the list of episodes that I assigned for us to read, but I mean, I'm sure you've seen it at some point, but have you revisited recently the episode Beauty and the Beast by any chance?
No.
So this is the
No,
one. It's
remind me of that one.
yeah. So it's in season 2. It's right before White Light. So this is still when Rita's off the board, and Zed gets it in his head that he wants Kimberly to be his queen.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
Look,
Doesn't
and
he
this is
turn her into Rita?
yeah. Well, so he tries to. So Goldar uses this. I mean, Goldar uses this magic dust on her to knock her out and put her under this spell to turn her into the evil queen. And when Kimberly awakes, you're not quite sure, or when she awakens, you're not quite sure if it worked. And you realize that it didn't, but she decides to play along with it, and so she pretends to be Rita. They've put her in the Rita garb, and she is clever
Yeah.
enough to go along with it. And look, to Amy Jo Johnson's credit, it is a spot on Rita Repulsa impression. For
Yep,
anyone,
it's coming back to me. Yep, yep.
like honestly, for audience viewers, listeners, if you don't remember this one, look up Power Rangers Beauty and the Beast. Look up if that one scene, if nothing else. She knocks it out of the park. I mean, she does the voice, she does the whole thing. I've got a headache, like that whole thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's just, and this is not, look, looking back on old media through modern eyes, of course, you're always going to find things that are problematic, and I'm not trying to like beat up on this, but it's just like looking at it, it's just, even for then, it's like this was a child. It's so weird to me that this was the premise for the episode. Like, if the premise had been Zed's nephew was visiting the moon and Zed wanted to fix him up with Kimberly, right? Then it's like, okay, then we could do this. I mean, look, it's obviously still problematic, nevertheless. But the fact that this was coming from Zed, it was just like, man, how did this fly even then? So weird, but great performance. Great performance.
Yeah, I'm so excited that you brought that up. I'm going to watch that when when we're done recording, because I totally forgot about that. But I do remember her jumping off the table, going like, "Hey, Goldar!" Wow, wow, wow! And even like watching it as a kid, I went, "Whoa!" Like, Kimberly's awesome.
Yeah, it was so good. It was really, really such a good episode. So, anyway, in this episode, or the mutiny arc, again, we have our Rangers on their motorbikes and Zordon filling them in about Zed and how Zed's so powerful. And again, we have this battle between the Rangers and the Putties, and they're ultimately able to prevail, but it's tough going. Zed creates this monster out of a piranha, Pirantis head, I think was the name of this villain. And
Given immediately, by the way, which like cracked me up. It's like, and he's a piranha, now a piranha set. And I was like, shut up, Zordon.
I had the same thought. It's like, come on.
Like, he knew it was going to happen, or they've had to fight Pirantis head on another planet like 10,000 years ago or something.
Maybe. It's like, I mean, I guess I think about, the Flash TV show, for example, and Cisco, right? Always naming the villains. And it's like it would make sense if one of the kids, like every time one of these monsters popped up, if one of the Rangers like gave them a name or
Like
something
a
like
Cisco
that.
Ramon, yeah.
Exactly. So I don't know. Crazy. So what was interesting here when they go into battle against Pirantis head, right? Like they know this is going to be a tougher battle than they've had before, right? They know that. So they know the stakes are higher. But one of the rules from Zordon is you never escalate a battle, right? Yet in this instance, they call on the Zords before Pirantis head grows, which I just thought was interesting. Like they went to the Zords a lot faster here than they normally do. And I can't think of any other instance previously off the top of my head where they summoned Zords before a monster grew. But I guess they just knew it was just tough times.
Yeah, it was kind of a bizarre choice on Jason's part to lead with that, but I guess he was, for lack of a better word, overcompensating. Like, well, if this is going to be tougher, then we're going to need the Zords immediately. So yeah, I'm at least headcanon in it that way. So as to not make them all look like morons, but but yeah, it was a strange choice. But to that scene, I do remember this vividly as a kid when Pirantis head freezes them, and Jason says, "Oh no, he froze the Zords. We're history," and it says "to be continued." And I had that same gut reaction when I rewatched it. I went, what are they going to do? Like, how are they going to beat this guy? And that's good. That is good storytelling. That's fuel for the next episode. You know.
That's the thing. And that's what's like so cool about these event episodes in particular, because you get to see, in a lot of instances, you get to see things that you haven't seen before. I think that's why when we talked about Green with Evil, why that was like so, just so striking as a kid, and even rewatching it now as an adult. It's like when Tommy enters the Megazord cockpit, it's like, oh my god, like this is
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
So
He can't do that.
yeah, it's like, whoa, this, like, we've seen a lot of episodes. This is not how it works. so so yeah, I mean, it definitely, again, I think the stakes are set pretty clearly here and effectively. And even though you know it will be all right, you still don't know exactly how you're going to get there. And it really pulls you in. And so, yes, Zedd and Paranta's Head, right? They have this ability. So Paranta's Head freezes the 4 Zords, right? And is able to also take control of the Tyrannosaurus and Dragon Zords.
Yeah.
Which really puts the Rangers in a bind. I mean, they're back in that command center. They're defeated. They feel like they've totally lost. Now, I mentioned this earlier, and I can't take all the credit. I think it was IMDb or Rangers Wiki that gave me this bit of trivia, but it tracks that this was the first instance in the series that we saw the Rangers helmetless.
Yeah, you said that earlier, and I was really taken aback. Like, I didn't realize that, but I think you're right. Because when Tommy's hair was shorter, we never saw him, like, right? Um, yeah, so that's really interesting. It must have been kind of cool for the actors to feel like, oh, like, here we are, like, finally tying it together. So that, at least I would have thought that. But I also just laugh a little bit, like, with Tommy's hair, Zach's hair, Kimberly's hair, and, like, they're all fitting in that helmet, just, like, wrapped around their necks or something. I don't know.
That's a fair point. But, that helmetless look is so, look, the design of the Rangers is awesome, but yeah, when they're fully garbed and the helmet's down, obviously, you're not seeing them. So, there's that little bit of connection that you're losing there, right? That you have when they're in their civilian mode and they're fighting the putties and you can see them doing everything and everything.
Yeah.
So I love the helmetless look because it's a nice way to sort of blend everything, and you get that, you really do get that connection. That's why, not to skip ahead, but the wedding arc was shot while the actors were making the Power Rangers movie, the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie in Australia. And in fact, in story, in the wedding arc, all the kids go on a class trip to Australia. Right. I'm thinking to myself, what school is this? I mean, like, all these kids.
We went 30 minutes down the road for a play.
Yeah, it was pretty. And I'm also saying to myself, man, like, they could have just teleported there. They could have saved the school a lot of money.
But at least Ernie was there to see them off.
Yes, at least there was that. But so they filmed those episodes and the following arc, Return of the Green Ranger, when everyone was in Australia to make the movie. And again, look, this was something I would not have noticed at all as a kid. But watching it now, we have very little time. We have precious few scenes of our actual actors there, right? There are a few scenes of them, like, getting ready to go to Australia. They get there. They walk around a little bit. They have lunch. They do a little shopping. They get called into action, or so they think, by Alpha. And then we see them again at the very end. For most of that 3-episode arc, they're fully morphed the entire time. Of course, you're hearing their voices, but that, we're not watching them. We're not watching the actual actors. And even the one scene where they escape the bad guys and they make it to the command center and they're helmetless, talking to Zordon and Alpha, stock footage or recycled footage.
Yep, I noticed that.
And it's, again, they made it work. And I totally get it. They're making a movie. It's actually kind of incredible that they still pumped out episodes at the same time.
No, seriously, especially with their schedule at the time was horrendous.
Yeah, so I was like, I totally get it. But I just, again, watching these 3-parters back to back, it was just this interesting juxtaposition where in the Mutiny, you get all of these scenes of them helmetless. And it's such a cool look. And you get this added sense of connection with them that you really don't have in the latter arc. So it was just kind of striking watching them together like that.
Um, I didn't get as deep as you did with that, but I did notice they were fully morphed without their powers. But so that's a bit of story, mental gymnastics we're doing in that sense. But yeah, but I thought about that. I was like, oh yeah, they were in Australia, so these are all the stunt doubles. But it 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 still blends pretty well together. But going back to the mutiny episodes and the when they're helmetless, it is a cool look because there's some iconography to that, isn't there? Where there's the picture of the six of them must have been from that episode. Now that I think about it, with their to the side, their arms up like that, and smiling at the camera, that they all get signed at cons and stuff. And so it's interesting looking at that and going, oh, that happened kind of late in the show. That's interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, I don't know if you were a member of the official fan club. Were you?
I probably was, but I don't remember.
Because I definitely had. I didn't keep it, unfortunately. When my parents sold our house, this was not all that long ago. When about 10 years ago, I guess at this point, and I had to clear everything out. And I took a picture of the box. I had it in a crawl space for years, and then it was time. It was like keep it or toss it. And I unfortunately I tossed it. I did take pictures at least, but yeah, it's those helmetless photos in the command center. You're right. There is really that imagery is so iconic to the show for sure. And I'll say, I mean, was there a more badass moment, well, other than Zedd's entrance, when Alpha leads the helmetless Rangers outside the command center, and where you get a little slow mo, and the music is playing because he's going to show them the new Zords. It's it's a really cool moment, and the way the camera is placed, like you're primarily seeing the helmets, like them carrying the helmets as they walk by the camera. It's cool. I love the look.
I I 100% agree. It made me think of when like YouTube was kind of first becoming like a big behemoth, and people realized they could edit stuff together and throw it on YouTube and call it whatever. And I remember like way back when, before there was ever a movie, or the newer movie, I should say, the 2017 one, people were putting together footage of the show and saying Power Rangers movie sequel, and that image was there. Excuse me, that them walking out of the command center like that, and that was my first thought rewatching it. And you're 100% right. It's so badass, but watching that, my first thought was like, oh my gosh, I think I watched a fake movie trailer with that image or with that reel in it.
I know, that's great. It's great. So hey, I guess this brings us to the bit of business with respect to the new Zords, right?
Mhm.
This introduces the Thunder Zords. Before I give my spiel on this, I mean, do you like this? This version of the Zords. Do you like the Thunder Zords coming off of our Dino Zords?
I did actually when I've kind of flip flopped as an adult, but when I was a kid, I loved it. I thought they all looked super cool, and um, the Red Dragon, that was one of my favorite toys when I was a kid. Especially when there were episodes like the Green Candle, or one of those episodes where no, it wasn't the Green Candle. I don't remember the episode title, but it was where all the other yellow, pink, black, and blue candles, right? And so it
Yes.
was just Jason, and he was in the Red Dragon in the warrior mode, and I was just thought that was so cool. And then I watch it now, and as an adult, and I just think when the Zords come together, they're just the armor for the Red Dragon Zord, except for the Pterodactyl Firebird Thunder Zord power. It's just the belt. That's all it is. It holds the sword there.
Yeah. I don't hate them, but they're not my favorite. And I feel like even as a kid, I mean, I remember having the toys. I don't know that I was ever as into them. I guess my heart was always with the dinosaurs,
Mm.
and even now, I don't really look at it as such a huge upgrade. I don't know. I don't hate it. It was just something about the design. I don't know. It didn't do it for me.
There was a time when my best friend and I remember when we both moved back to Erie around the same time. That's an off mic conversation we had. I'm bringing back, so nobody will understand this, but you and me. Anyway, so anyway, my best friend and I are out like drinking, and of course like we're huge pop culture nerds, and I think Power Rangers came up at some point, and I was like, dude, Power Rangers like ended up sucking, and this is why they went from dinosaurs to mythological creatures to like fire trucks and police cars. Like, what a step down. And he burst out laughing and brings it up every now and then. Every now and then I'll get a text from him going, "What a step down." um, but at the time I was like, these are the coolest things I've ever seen. Whereas like when they started being Lightspeed Rescue, I was like, I no, I'm done.
Yeah, man. I tapped out before Turbo, but I am going to dip my toes into those waters later on for the podcast because it's part of Tommy's journey. And I think that's sort of become our guiding light here a little bit as we're planning out what we're going to cover. But just the concept of it, like you said, going from all of these mythological creatures and everything to vehicles, I don't know. I think that's going to be a tough pill to swallow. But I did think, I thought that the light show or the show in the sky that Zordon and Alpha create where they show off the new Zords was cool. I also did like when Zordon says to them, he's like, you're going to need the power of thunder to defeat Zedd. And Billy's like, power of thunder.
he makes it like, remind me the actor who plays Zordon.
David Yost. David Yost?
No, Zordon.
Oh, Zordon. David Fielding does the voice, but I don't know if that's later. I'm not 100% sure.
I'm pretty sure it's him, but he made an acting choice to say thunder, like he's not saying thunder. He's putting his whole diaphragm into it every time, and I respected it. That was a great choice.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, for sure. Now this also comes from the Rangers wiki, but and this is a larger conversation, but. Right. As us Rangers fans know, right. The show was, based on the Super Sentai series, which had, many, many iterations. Right. And in time, the American show would emulate this changing of the guard every season. Right. Mm-hmm. But in the beginning, they didn't. They kept our core group of actors, even as some left and were replaced, but we still kept the same group. And we were Mighty Morphin for 3 seasons. Yeah. But there came a point where they were out of footage, right? And then they were pulling from other series. And so you started to get these combinations. So my understanding is that those Thunder Zords come from a different series than our other, Dino Zord and Mighty Morphin footage. I don't know if that lines up with your understanding. I believe that's the case. And what Rangers Wiki told me was that it was an American original, the cockpit that they created and filmed. Right, of our Mighty Morphin Rangers in the Thunder Megazord. So, just interesting.
I always, not as a kid, but now watching it, I did realize that, like, the cockpit scenes are definitely, like Zedd, their American footage. But I did not know that came from like a whole different thing. But again, it's cut together well. It's almost like 2 actors that don't want to be in the same, scene together, even though they have to be in the same scene. So they have to edit it. So, the Thunder Megazord is going to punch and then the other monster's going to jump away. So that, clever editing. They got us.
That's what I've been noticing. Not in every episode but I've been noticing that more now where you're not seeing the Zords and the monsters in the same shot. Where you'll see one throw a punch or fire a blaster or whatever, and then you'll see the other one get hit or fall, but you never see them together. But again, as a kid, it's like you're not clocking that, but it definitely stands out now, watching it as an adult. So, we get these new Zords. Unfortunately, Tommy's not strong enough to get a new Zord, but his new Zord's coming. He'll be all right a few episodes down the line. But, for now, he doesn't get the upgrade that the rest of them do. Did you like this was... as far as suspension of disbelief and it's just sort of their mumbo jumbo. It's like this idea that Zordon and Alpha have created new Zords, but they can't be activated until the old Zords are freed from Paranta's head's grip, right? Which they're ultimately able to achieve because good old Billy's always clutch. Billy's always the one. The rest, you know what? I feel like Billy is the MVP of all of this because episode after episode, all of them, even Jason, even the leader, even Tommy, the badass, the sixth ranger, and then later the leader himself, they're always like standing around. They never know what to do. It's like, oh, we've lost. All is lost. We're defeated. Billy's always the one who's like, oh, I think maybe I could come up with something. So
Yeah.
props to Billy. So he and Trini make this signal jammer that's able to disrupt the signal. But even then, Zed destroys the Zords, but Alpha's able to like encase them in some sort of energy field or whatever long enough to generate the new Zords. I mean, I didn't quite follow the science of it, but it seemed to work.
It's one of those nitpicky things where as a kid, I didn't think anything of it. Like, whatever, sure, that makes sense. Who cares? I didn't, I'm not clocking that as a kid, but as an adult, I'm watching it, and I sort of wanted there just to be a moment. It's like, you have to get control of the old Zords. Why? They're vital to the creation of the new Zords. Okay, Zord. My question again is, why?
Yeah, no, I totally valid question. Again, if this were being written now, I think you'd probably get a little bit more of that back and forth. There was talking about instances where we get a little bit more depth. There was another glimmer of this. It was, relatively brief, but it's when Billy and Trini are working on their signal jammer, and Paranta's head is attacking the motocross rally here, and Zordon orders the remaining Rangers to stay at the command center, because if they go back into battle and lose, then everything's lost, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it gets to a point where, Jason's like, look, we have to go. And, the show kind of backed off real quick because Zordon was like, yes, it's an urgent situation. You better go. It would have been nice if there had still been a little bit more tension. But I did like that, even for that brief moment, it's like Jason doesn't know what Zordon is going to say, but that's not stopping him, right? Like he said he's going back because they have to do this. So I really appreciated that, again, when we get these little glimpses. And this also gives us the phrase "back to action," which I almost called this podcast, but I obviously went in a different direction. But we get that here because it's like once they're already morphed and the helmets are off, they got to say something, but it's not Morphin time.
Yeah. Oh my God. This was the first time that was said?
Again, according to Rangers Wiki, and I think that makes sense because, again, we haven't had these instances of them in this mid state here. So I believe that tracks. So again, listen, people, if you're listening, you're watching, and you're like, no, you don't know what you're talking about, Rangers Wiki is wrong, let me know, please. But that's the information I'm relying on. So it seems like this is where it started, which makes sense.
It does, if you're saying the timing would line up then, right? With this is the first time we see them helmetless. Then yeah, they got to say something. They can't just morph again. They're already morphed. They just got to put their helmets back on. Wow, that's interesting. But that was a moment I did notice as well. Jason being like, we have to go. Like it made me smile, thinking like, oh yeah, these guys are heroes. Like they know the stakes. They understand what's happening. And there's no like, oh, we'll be fine. We've done this before. It's very much them understanding we might not come back from this, and that's really cool. And those actors, they, for the show they were making, just a fun cheesy kid show. When it mattered, they could sell it, and I was sold there when they're like, no, we got to go, and it just was like, yeah, like. It made, like I said, it made me smile. It's just like, yes, like these guys, they're the heroes for a reason, because I would have not gone.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, I echo all of that. Look, say what you will about the acting, and I think for a lot of them, they grew into it over time. But yeah, I mean, it really, they sell it. And also, to their credit, especially when we're in these multi-part episodes, it's like, it's a lot of the same thing over and over. It's like, oh, you got control over Zords. Oh, what are we going to do? not only do they have to sell it once, but they like sell it over and over in the
Right,
same
right.
way a lot of times. So for sure, we have this now for I believe the entire duration of the Thunder Zord era, where the Rangers call their Zord, but they call both the original Dino Zord and the new like pterodactyl fire. Oh my god, I'm already blanking on it. Was it Firebird? No,
Firebird, yeah.
Fire. Okay, like pterodactyl
Fire
Firebird.
belt is what it was.
Yeah.
The belt. Much
Uh,
better purpose with Tommy's Tiger Sword. It was the actual weapon, which was cool. You
or
tired of being a belt?
yeah. Oh man. Or Triceratops, Unicorn, the Thunderzord. So they call both, and you see the original Dinozord, and then like lightning strikes and it morphs into the new one. Which I don't know if we're meant to think that that's what was happening literally, or if that was more of like like the spirit of the original Zord was giving rise to the new one. I'm probably putting more thought into this than I should. But did you do you like do you like the effect of like seeing the original one and then the new Thunder Zord?
No, even when I was a kid, it got old real fast. I because it happens twice in this two-parter, and just rewatching it last night, I remembered feeling that way as a kid, going, okay, we don't need this. Like, and even more annoying, in my opinion, was that the helmets didn't change. Like, why didn't the helmets and the uniforms change? They never change when they get the Ninja Zords or when they get the Shogun Zords. They never change. To this day, it bugs the living hell out of me. I can't get over it.
I know. Well, that's because they were pulling from different, different series.
Yeah, yeah, Haim Saban, he really, he knew where and when to spend his money.
The real killer, and I've really been dialed into this as I've been watching now, is the difference in the gold shield between the
Yeah.
American footage and the Japanese footage. It's
Mhm.
crazy. It's like,
Uh,
why? What happened there?
that I first noticed rewatching as an adult and going, "Oh, that is atrocious." You could have spent just a little bit more money there. At least the White Ranger was consistent, so I did appreciate that.
Yeah, that was fine, but yeah, the Green Ranger outfit. It's like there's never. I mean, you can tell otherwise when we're looking at American versus Japanese footage, but if you couldn't, all you have to do is look at that shield. It's just
Yep.
it's so much. It's just like it's so much bigger, brighter, and flimsier.
Yeah,
It's so
flimsy for
noticeable.
sure.
It's so
It
noticeable.
it was. I mean, that was what the our Halloween costumes look like. When we were little kids. So, going as whichever ranger was our favorite, or whichever ones weren't sold out at the store our moms went to.
Yeah, very true. So I think we've probably hit most of the major beats of the mutiny. This also sets Bulk and Skull. They get rescued by the Power Rangers. This sets them on their season long
Yeah.
quest to uncover the identity of the Rangers. I found this season they got a little bit more palatable. I mean, I'm on record as saying a little bit of Bulk and Skull goes a long way. I still agree with that. Your point is
Hmm.
really well taken, though. I'm with you, man. That music is so grating.
Yeah.
Their theme
Yeah.
music. I would love, maybe someone's even done this, but if not, I would love for someone to just like rescore some Bulk and Skull scenes. And I bet they get a lot more watchable. It was just I found that music so annoying. It just created this overall effect. I mean, again, the characters are very very cartoonish, and again, I like small doses is best, but the music doesn't help.
No, it doesn't. But rewatching and having similar feelings about Bulk and Skull, I I really there was something about these episodes that I don't know. I really appreciated the slapstickness of it. Like the skull, like it's like a Scooby Doo bit, right? Like there's the monster behind you, and it's just, uh, and then them being stuck, like going, backwards on the bikes, and the Power Rangers laughing at first, and then going, okay, we better go help them. I just thought like that, that little bit was cute, but for some reason, when Jason was like, "You guys all right over there?" Like, okay, like, be, we're on our way out of here, whatever he says. I don't know. And Bulk says, we're going to find out who they really are. I just remember feeling, I felt this way as a kid, and I felt this way now, going, awesome. Like, these guys have something to do, you know?
Yes. No, I will say I think that's the most I ever liked Bulk and Skull when they were trying to
Yeah,
figure out the Rangers' identities. Now the comics, I think making them podcasters who are following the Rangers, I love that. I love that whole angle.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, for the show, I think this was, at least from what I remember, was among the best. So, moving now, we're skipping ahead deep into season 2, and we've already hit on a lot of this wedding 3-parter, which aired in February 1995. In fact, one of the installments dropped on Valentine's Day. So
Mm,
fittingly enough, we have the return of Rita. Now, like you said, there was this white light episode where her dumpster landed on Earth. Bulk and Skull got it. They tried to free her. She ultimately got out, still miniaturized, but the Rangers intervened and sent her back into space. So
yeah.
now she lands on the moon. This is during the period where Zed has his, once in 100 years sleep, where he needs to
Yeah.
re-energize. Quite a flaw, for such a powerful villain. This is quite a flaw to have.
It's also, you know, like a truce has been called. They're like, oh, this is Zed's 100 year sleep. Yeah, that's when you go and assassinate him. You know, freaking idiots. Do we take care of all evil in the universe now? We'll go to Australia to go shopping. Well, we already bought the plane tickets. So,
I I know. I guess it just goes back to Zordon's whole thing about not escalating, right? It's like
sure. Yeah.
if you attack us with a monster, we will defend ourselves, but we wouldn't be proactive and try to take you out. And I won't even go so far as assassinate. Even within the realm of a kid show, it's like, yeah, I mean, why not mount some sort of attack and banish Zed? That would have been a fun episode. Like, this is a tangent, but I'll keep it quick. I don't know if you're a fan of the show Supernatural.
Seen bits here
All
and
right.
there.
You haven't seen all 15 seasons?
Yeah. Well, I got. I think small.
You were breaking up there, but I think you were starting to say about Smallville maybe and its 10 season run. You're still frozen there. Hopefully you'll kick back in a second here. Okay, there you are. Were you starting to say about Smallville?
I was just. I got through 10 years of that. 8 years of Arrow. I stopped at Simpsons at like 8. That's about as high as I go on Disney Plus.
Gotcha. I'll keep this real quick. So Supernatural, 10 years, two brothers fight against evil. 15 years, there was one season, it was season 8, where their quest for the season was they wanted to get their hands on these demon tablets that would enable them to close the gates of hell. And it's one of my favorite seasons. I think it's strong generally, but what I always loved about it was like they were actually being proactive. It wasn't just, hey, we're fighting whatever monsters are in our way this episode or this season. This was like they had an objective. They were taking it upon themselves to try to take care of all of these monsters once and for all. To see somewhat of an equivalent of that in Power Rangers, I think would have been kind of cool. So anyway, yeah, Zed's asleep. Zordon, rather than taking the opportunity to strike, Zordon and the Rangers figure, okay, this is a perfect time. We can take our trip to Australia.
Yeah.
And so again, the Rangers are off, and Rita sees this as her moment to strike. Right, she lands on the moon. She goes to Finster's workshop. Again, she's still miniaturized. He's able to regrow her pretty quickly, and she asks him for a potion to make Zed fall in love with her.
Yeah.
Which Finster does. And he also creates, as we said before, this rejuvenating face cream for her that when she washes it off, it's like she's a different person. Like a totally different person. As she says, she looks not a day over 1,000. So now we have our American actress, again, being dubbed over by our other American actress
Right.
to create the version of Rita that now we'll be with moving forward here. As we now have this American shot villain footage on the moon centered around, Zed and now Rita. Were you happy to see? I mean, I don't know to what extent you remember from when you were a kid, but even just now, like, were you happy when Rita came back, or did you feel like, hey, we got a good thing going with Zed? We don't we don't necessarily need this.
I just remember feeling like I guess indifferent. Like I enjoyed it, and I'm glad that it happened. But I didn't think I as boring as an answer as that is, like I didn't feel majorly either way. I just thought, oh, this is where we're going. Like when I said now what earlier, it's like, oh, this is the now it's another now what. So that was the possibility was kind of cool to me.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I like yourself. I don't know. It's funny looking back at the show. I mean, it's been 30 years and we were little kids watching it.
Mm.
There are certain things, again, there were things during Green with Evil, things with the Mighty Morphin movie and, the Ninja era and Zeo in particular. Like there are certain things there, White Light, certain things that I really do have vivid memories of watching.
Yeah,
And I can kind of remember what my reaction was. Yeah, I don't know that I don't have necessarily a great answer either, but in this context for this rewatch, it was fun. I liked how it played out. I mean, it was funny. Like I said before, you get very little of our Ranger cast here. We talked about the little bit that you see of them in Australia. Then a corrupted Alpha 5, because Finster is able to, insert this disc into his back while he's taking a walk outside the command center because he misses the Rangers and he has nothing to do. So Alpha is under the influence of the villains, and he lures the Rangers into this trap in this abandoned theater, which, as it turns out, is in the center of a vortex, and they don't have any powers in there. So
they can keep their costumes on though.
they can keep the yeah. That's the thing. Well, I know that, right? Like any other episode or season, right? They would have demorphed, and we would have seen them for the duration. But here, it's like, no, you could keep the costumes and helmets on, but you have no powers.
It's like, otherwise we're filming something and we're filming something else. It's fine, just go.
But I think what ends up happening in this art, and so the Rangers are trapped in this theater and they're facing off against, like you said before, this greatest hits of monsters, right, from throughout the series, and they're ultimately able to escape the theater. They get into their Zords. They have a Zord battle. Alpha cuts the power to the Zords and teleports them back to the theater. They're stuck there again. Eventually, Aisha pretends that she's giving up. Of course, it's a ruse. They throw a net on the monsters. They escape again. They make it to the command center. We get that recycled footage that we talked about earlier. They free Alpha. They get into the Zords and they win. That's all to say, I thought weirdly, the Ranger aspect of that three-parter I thought was the least engaging and least interesting, but I enjoyed everything that was going on the moon and also in the command center as a deranged Alpha 5 was like really giving it to Zordon. It was pretty hilarious, I thought.
Yeah. It was the least engaging because I thought that when they my adult brain was going like, oh, I love how they're filming this. Like we never noticed this as kids, but this totally makes sense. Like those are the stunt doubles, and and now they can cut away to this other footage, and they're using this it's stock footage of the eye guy and the peckerhead or whatever that bird monsters thing was. So that like that I got excited watching all that because I thought that the Lord Zedd stuff was just so like, and I don't even mean this in a bad way when I put it this way, but it was ridiculous. So much fun to watch, but ridiculous.
Well, no, I mean, like, your point is well taken. And for anyone who is really, really beholden to that initial version of Zedd that we get, what I just said is probably so antithetical to that. So I understand because, yeah, I mean, Zedd wakes up, he's under the effects of the potion. He's in love with Rita. He wants to get married. He makes Goldar his best man, AKA worst man. And he, takes him to task for not being able to get a musician on short notice. And then he makes one of the monsters play the wedding march, and Finster performs the ceremony. And then apparently they're Jewish because they play Hava Nagila during the reception.
I loved it.
Which was hilarious. And to see the putties dancing was great. Like, it was so funny. But yes, it's like off the wall. It's bonkers. And it is a far cry.
Like
Yeah. I mean, it's such a far cry from that first scene we described of Zedd materializing there on the moon on that throne with a snake crawling all over him. Like it's very divorced from that, no pun intended, since now we're talking wedding. But it was entertaining, and again, I guess I remember this iteration of Zed so well. The Rita Zed team up and the family bickering and like that whole aspect. So I welcome getting to that part of the story, but it is a departure. So for the Zed purists, I can understand why maybe it's not as well received.
What's funny is that I, I must have completely misremembered this because I thought that there was especially the way the episodes play out, you think that Rita's gonna make Zed marry her, and then she's essentially gonna be like a Black Widow, right? That was the vibe I was getting, especially in part one. And when Goldar, I felt like kind of figured out what was going on, and I thought that he put the love potion on Rita so that she wouldn't be able to overthrow him. They would just be in it together. And when that didn't happen, it blew my mind. It was like, I swear to God, I remember that happening. But that was just my own headcanon, and it just almost works in sort of a Shakespearean way, like, well, if you want this, then you'll be trapped in that forever, so you won't be able to overthrow him like you want. And I don't know. I was just like watching it, going, where the hell is that scene?
I know it is crazy when you have that memory and it's just not lining up. Maybe there's something else that we just haven't gotten to yet, because as if I remember correctly, I think there is an instance where Zed is cured of the potion or it wears off or something like that, but it turns out he loves Rita for real. I think that happened at some point, so maybe there's more business with another potion or
Oh,
something.
yeah, maybe it's later in the season. That literally did not occur to me till just now.
It's
So,
yeah, I
listeners,
mean,
I swear I'm smart.
no, look, yeah, and look for people who are listening or watching, I'm sure there's a range of levels of experience and memories of the show, right? For people who have been rewatching it and reading about it and studying it, yeah, I'm sure you know all of the beats and you know where we're where we're misstepping here. But I'm sure there are
Right.
others who are maybe a little bit more casual or haven't gone back to it, and so maybe it sounds like we know a lot. So we're here to have a good time either way. But we'll keep an eye out. Maybe as we rewatch more episodes, we'll see if and when we get to what you're talking about here. But I feel like the villains carry a lot of the story here, as do Alpha and Zordon. I will say it did genuinely make two things really made me laugh. Is that the putties dancing at the wedding and Alpha putting hair and sunglasses and a mustache on Zordon genuinely made me
Yeah.
laugh. And then again, that was another thing, just like Zordon singing. I completely forgotten, but I was like, all right, that is pretty funny. So, at least we had that.
I had forgotten about. Well, yeah, it's funny because I had forgotten about that. But my first thought was like, that's so funny. Alpha had the first Snapchat filter. You know?
Yeah, essentially. I don't know.
Yeah.
Overall, I felt like, I would say generally, when we get into the realm of a three-part story, you really got to have a lot of story to justify 3 episodes. And,
Yeah.
the mutiny probably could have been 2. But I guess there was enough there that they can make it to 3. The wedding
Yeah.
really, I think, should have been 2. I felt like it was getting quite tedious, especially since we weren't seeing the Rangers, and I was really, making note of like I was still not seeing them. But overall enjoyable. Is there anything else that you wanted to say about either of these arcs, or anything that we didn't get to yet that you wanted to talk about?
I'm sorry. What was the first part of that you cut off?
Oh, sorry. Just that. Is there anything else that you wanted to say about either of these arcs that we didn't get to?
On the monster side of things, on the moon, I the more I thought about it when I was watching it, I was like, it just feels so like I Love Lucy ish that I think as a kid I didn't pick up on or care, but as an adult I really appreciated, like, can you play the wedding march? It's like, well, if you hum a few bars, I might be able to do it. And like you said, the putties dancing, it's so damn funny. But I, it. So the villain aspect of it, I thought was just, as an adult, I appreciated it way more. It was very funny and very, like you said, more engaging than the other stuff. Even though on the other side of things, it was cool to have all the monsters teaming up and showing up again, and then the bulk and skull of it in the wedding episodes, they get teleported to like somewhere else in Australia where they have to fight a kangaroo or something. Um, just oh, and one more thing that stuck with me was the really bizarre, and maybe does this happen in Australia? Hopefully, you have listeners that can lobster extra fresh.
You cut out there for a second, but I know exactly what you're talking about. When Bulk and Skull order, the extra fresh lobster, and it's a live lobster.
Yeah.
I've never been to Australia. I took that as the waitress messing with them, but yeah, please let us know.
I'm just genuinely curious if it was like a prank by the waitress, if it was like just how it is in Australia, or maybe it was just a joke that I'm way overthinking. But I don't know, just both of them going extra fresh is also seared into my memory.
I will say it was also funny when the Rangers were just kind of hanging out. The bulk, no pun intended, of their conversation was about basically like, busting Kimberly's chops for how much she's buying on this shopping spree.
Yeah.
And at one point, someone says like, "Oh, how are you going to get all of this back?" And Rocky's like, "Oh, you need a tugboat." And they all think that's like the funniest thing that they have ever heard. Like Jason or Tommy in particular is like, "A tugboat?" And he's like laughing his head off.
Yeah, it's that he said that, and they all started laughing. And I just had my Jim moment, from The Office. I just looked at the invisible camera next to me and just went, "Oh, well, that just happened," oh my gosh! But but clearly Kimberly was very much the I don't remember her last name, but like Cher from Clueless, right? That's essentially her character, where she was just that close to saying "as if," right?
Yes. I guess the last thing I would say, not to harp on this, but actually to make a larger point about, when we see the Rangers morphed so much during the wedding arc, and how kind of loses a little something. You're still hearing their voices, right? So we have our actors are still performing the lines, but it's the stunt people in the costumes, and kind of tying all of this together, talking about the writing. The dialogue's not the best. It's a lot of, it's basically, kind of takes one of two forms. It's either very, practical and tactical, like we're going to go here, we're going to go there, or what are we going to do? Like all hope is lost. No, we got to stick together. Guys, if we just work together, we'll do it. It's just like a lot of that over and over. Like, why did Alpha send us here? I don't know. We better trust him. We better, so the dialogue only gets you so far. And when you don't have the emotion of what they're able to convey, again, I think you just kind of hit a wall. So again, to kind of put this into a positive, I think like the actors really did bring a lot to it, because when you don't see their faces for an entire episode, it really kind of shows what value they bring, right? It goes beyond just like, hearing their voices delivering a line. It's really this whole other level.
What it really reminds me of is an annoyance I, as a kid, used to have, and as I got older, kind of understood, like the idea of having every Spider-Man has to, rip his mask off at the final battle, right? And in the case of No Way Home, they rip them off like 842 times. But so you could.
We cut out again. Audience, we apologize for the technical difficulties. I think we're just dealing with a little rough Wi-Fi here tonight. So I know we've had a few cutoffs here, audience, but thank you for bearing with us. So if you don't mind just taking that again, you're talking about Spider-Man and how, you know, and like all these movies, like the mask's always coming off.
Yeah, yeah. Did it freeze again?
Yeah.
Yeah, they. But it's important that you rip the mask off, because now we can see what the character is thinking and feeling. You know, and same thing with the Power Rangers. We can't see their faces. It makes a gigantic difference. I remember people on Twitter before the Batman came out were going on and on saying, you know, wouldn't this look better? And it's always fan art of all the live action Batman with the white eyes over. And I love the way my friend Bill Ramey has always said it, where he's like, no, nope, that doesn't work at all. We have to be able to see the character's eyes. We have to see the actor's eyes. And on that tangent for another second, that I felt that watching the new The Batman. Like, I felt the character. I felt the emotion coming from Robert Pattinson. He does a lot of acting with his eyes. And so with the Power Rangers, if we don't get to see their faces, the term I use all the time on my podcast, the emotional reality gets lost. And that, you know, obviously strikes a chord, because here you are saying, you know, it bothered me. I could hear their voices, but that wasn't enough for me.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of your podcast, For Comic Junkies, where can people find it? What would you want to tell people about it?
It was kind of a strange, well, not strange, but it was something where there's all these thoughts in my head about growing up, loving comic books, loving superheroes, loving all that stuff, and feeling like I love this for a reason. Again, there's an emotional reality to it. There's stuff that we can all relate to. And I felt that some podcasts I listened to weren't touching on those things. And I'd reach out to the hosts and say, hey, what about this? What about this? And people would just go, oh, that's cool. So I thought, I'll start my own. So For Comic Junkies, FOR, not four, the number 4, if nobody can see me. But anyway, you know, so it's meant to be inclusive. So we all have these, we just had, you know, an almost like an hour and a half plus discussion about Power Rangers all these years later on your show. So clearly I wasn't alone feeling like these things matter. So that's why I started my podcast, For Comic Junkies, which you can find pretty much anywhere you get your podcasts. And I also have the Spider-Man Book Club, where we talk about different Spider-Man books throughout the years, as well as the recent Marvel movies and Marvel news. Every now and then that comes up. But yeah, and that is also available wherever you get your podcasts. And you can find me on Twitter at 4ComicJunkies.
Awesome. Well, JJ, thank you very much. I really had a lot of fun talking about these episodes of Power Rangers. I know before we started, I was like, well, I don't know how long we'll go. You know, if we'll even hit an hour. It's like, and this is not the first time I've said this about various recordings, and it's we never have a problem hitting it. So
yeah.
But it was really a lot of fun. So thank you very much. And audience, thank you as always for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Make sure you come back next time for our next episode. And until then, once a Ranger fan, always a Ranger fan. This show is part of the Flat Squirrel Podcast Network, home to Digging for Kryptonite, another exciting episode in the adventures of Superman, Summoning the Zords, and My Comic Shop History, available wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review today. Sign up at patreon.com/Anthony Desiato for additional content. Thank you all.